Welcome to the Behavioral View. I'm Nissa Van Etten with my co-host Olivia Teal. Each episode, we will talk with practitioners, researchers, and leaders about the work of behavior analysis, how we understand it, how we use it, and how it's evolving. We take a straightforward look at the field, what's working, what's challenging, and how our decisions shape the work we do. Thanks for being here. This is the Behavioral View. If you're looking to earn a CEU, just listen to the full episode and then complete the short quiz that follows. That's all it takes. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6.4 of the Behavioral View. My name is Nissa Van Etten, and I am the Director of Clinical Training in CR Institute here at Central Reach. I'm joined by my wonderful colleagues. I'm going to let introduce themselves. I'll turn it over to you.
I'm Olivia. I am the Manager of ABA Content Strategy and Development here at Central Reach Institute.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Barajas. I'm a Clinical AI Solutions Architect here at Central Reach Institute.
All right. So if you're tuning in to us today, we're going to do something a little bit different that hasn't been done before, or maybe it has with our predecessors, but we are new to you all here on the Behavioral View, and we wanted to spend some time getting to know you. One thing I also want to point out as we jump in is getting to know you also means please give us your feedback. As you're listening to this, maybe you're in your car driving to work or you're on a walk with your dog. This podcast is for you, our listeners. So the more feedback we get about content, about us, anything that you're looking for, we definitely will read that feedback. We want to respond accordingly. But I'm going to pause, and we were hoping to just have this conversation be about career pathing, a chit chat with our team, and really letting us share our stories and how we came to be a team together as we move into 2026.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think there's so many different avenues that people can take, but a lot in the very traditional clinical space. So I'm really excited to dive more into each of our stories and hopefully resonate with some people.
Absolutely. And I have questions for both of you as well.
All right, Liz, kick it off. Take it away.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I am answering just a little bit, or I guess I'm sharing. So I'm sharing a little bit about myself and how I got where I'm at right now. Let's see. Exactly as Olivia said, many of us started as BT. So that is where I kicked things off. I actually heard about ABA in my UCI undergrad. Just as I was graduating, I had a friend tell me how they loved their job working as a behavior technician. And I loved working with kids. I had a lot of experience doing that. And I just decided when I go into my master's program, I get my master's in clinical psychology, I wanted to do that work on the side. It just seemed like a really good fit. So I did that. And my original plan in my master's program was to go and get my PhD in clinical psychology. But I fell in love with ABA and working directly with the kids. And it just felt like there was going to be a lot of opportunity to work as a BCBA. And it just made sense. I think I was at a point where I was trying to decide if maybe I wanted to pursue marriage and family therapy or become a BCBA at the time. And ultimately, I just was falling in love with the idea of becoming a BCBA. I had a really good mentor at that time. And the work just gave me the warm and fuzzies. That's always the expression I use for just the work that we were doing. And so I decided to pursue that route. And towards the end of my master's, I just started taking the coursework. So I started at a traditional ABA company and then actually had the chance to work at a private school for children with autism and loved that. Yeah, it was incredible. It was an interesting experience because I was actually working in Orange County, 'cause I did my undergrad at UCI. And after I graduated from my master's, I started that job. And it was a very rich, wealthy area. And I think it's worth noting that this private school, parents were paying largely out of pocket.
But it was ask about funding and how that works. So that's interesting.
Yeah, they were paying. I think it was like more than college tuition. It was a lot of money that they were paying. But I had it was incredible. But I had the benefit of working in just different types of clinicians were working there. We had occupational therapy, speech therapy, as well as other types of services, as well as like art and music class. And there was even a point where I thought maybe that I wanted to go and get a teaching credential because I just love the classroom experience. But I have to say, it was not your traditional school. We had maybe 6 kids in one classroom. Very different, right, from your traditional school environment. But it was just amazing. The teachers and the clinicians that worked there truly loved the work that they were doing. And we just had really great resources. I had the opportunity to work very closely with the occupational therapist and speech therapist. And the owner of the organization of the school would actually bring in bigwigs in the field to come and speak and provide consultation on some of the cases that we had, which was, I feel very lucky to have had that experience. It was pretty cool. So then from there, I moved back into a more traditional, worked for another ABA organization, fairly large. And I actually ended up transitioning away from that school because I realized that despite having access to these amazing clinicians, the school was struggling to provide that fieldwork supervision, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That was an issue.
I'm so interested in is like in that model, we're hunting our own field work, right? We're in a whole different world now than then. But that field work component is a difficult and was a difficult piece to acquire when you were in a site that wasn't specific to building clinicians in the workforce.
Yeah, and I would absolutely say that was a huge driving force for inspiring my long-term goals of what I wanted to do, and also really saying I want to be different as a BCBA. So I had some amazing clinic supervisors, and then I had some where I was like, I am going to do things differently. I think one of the big things was, like I said, I transitioned away from that school environment because I was struggling to get the supervision that I needed. And then I went to another organization, a much larger one, that afforded me the opportunity to actually get promoted into a mid-level position as I was in my program. But I would still say that I struggled, I think, to get the quality supervision that I really needed. And I'm sure we'll talk about this, struggles we had. I've grown a lot since I first started, especially since I first got certified. But when I first started as a mid-level supervisor, I was so focused on, how do I put this? What does the research say? What does the clinical text say? Not really understanding and emphasizing the importance of building relationships. And I think you've heard me mention this in another podcast episode. It's just the importance of remembering we work for people. We are in people's homes, families' homes. And so I actually really struggled as a program manager when I started. Like, it was bad because I was so technical. I wasn't adapting my language. I wasn't taking the time to really get to know the parents that I was working with and the life that I was ultimately supporting them living. And so there were a lot of gaps in my understanding and communication. And it actually wasn't until I went to I had a very heartfelt conversation with my father, who's been like my mentor my whole life, inspiring me professionally. And he helped me recognize that the issue I was having was, long story short, just it can be really hard to have to work with a family and maintain those boundaries and then have to go to another family. And I think part of what I might have been doing is actually protecting myself by not trying to get too close to the families and maintain those professional boundaries. So I wasn't asking any questions. I'm just like, let's look at the program.
You're worried about the ethics, right? That dual relationship. Can you relate also, to that? It's that black and white level of 1.11, multiple relationships. I will not cross that boundary.
And so I think as a interesting thing, I didn't realize that's what I was doing, because as I had made these transitions from these different organizations, there's also that process of leaving these amazing children that you're working with. And that was very hard for me, very hard. Even as I'm talking, I'm thinking about some of those kiddos that I work with that I'm there to change their life, but they're frankly like changing me and making me feel so purposeful and meaningful in terms of making a difference. I think that's why so many of us do the work we do. And long story short, I was given the opportunity when leaving that organization that I was at to work at a startup. And it was right at that time that I started to realize maybe what was happening, why I was struggling as a program manager. And I happened to, at this company, one of the first things the owner told me was, we are going to always put the parents first. We are going to do whatever we can to provide the best services. And so if I'm hiring you, I need to know that you are fully invested in quality care and that we're here to do it better than anyone else can do it, because we know that families don't go anywhere.
Was that owner a BCBA?
Yep, she sure was. It was actually a husband and wife.
That I honestly think that lends itself to a different structure of how services are provided. I also have worked clinically for a husband-wife behavior analytic team, and just the level of care that goes into the treatment provided is a unique experience for the family because there's so much thoughtfulness into parent training the staff, even scheduling and hours. Those are all components that again, I'm not saying non-behavior analysts are not compassionate,
Yeah.
but there's a different side of compassion that some CEOs or organization leaders understand when they are clinicians themselves.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I think also just understanding the audience, the people that you're employing, what drives them. Of course, everyone's different. Everyone's motivated by different things. But from a professional standpoint, there's shared interests professionally and academically. And what drives us, I think, we're interested in human behavior, understanding emotional intelligence, I think is something that within the field of psychology and ABA, even though we obviously focus on behavior, I think it generally stems from an interest in people and understanding people, period. Ultimately, like I said, when I had that first meeting with them or that interview for that position, they made it very clear that was the number one thing. And for me at that time, it was like, this is exactly what I need, because I
need
just
this.
come to the revelation I needed to grow in that area. And it was something that I immediately just decided that was going to be my focus area. And because it was a startup, when it was a husband and family, we very much felt like family. And I had the opportunity to essentially work with the owners to grow that organization from a team of 15 to a team of 500. And from one location in the backyard, if you will,
I think we need to pause on that. That's huge.
Yeah, it was
huge growth.
very exciting. Yeah, we'll talk about this. I'm curious to hear about both of you guys and the opportunities you guys have had. But even thinking about the research article that we read, right, that talked about women in behavior analysis and the inductees, you have finding and fighting for your own opportunity, but also recognizing that there are people that will fight for you and will give you the opportunity. I would say that organization really helps set the stage for me, I think, in terms of taking a chance on me. Because like I said, prior to starting at that organization, I was actually struggling, but I was like, I am determined to get this right. I think I know what it is. And they allowed me to grow with them. And I moved from working as a BCBA
I like what you said about.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just
fast
what you said about taking a chance, because I think people might take a chance on us, but whenever you try to step into, I know you were still in the traditional clinical ABA space with a startup, like you're also taking a chance as a clinician. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting, because I'm sure we'll get into it once we talk about all of our backgrounds, but going into a different avenue that's maybe not traditional and what you hear about the most when you think about becoming a BCBA, you need people to take a chance on you, especially if you're a new clinician, but also you're taking a chance, like stepping outside the box a little bit. And I think we might need more of that in this field.
Absolutely.
I agree completely. Agreed.
Yeah.
Olivia, how did you get here? How did you get in front of
where did I come from? I'm not sure. No, very similar to Liz. I feel like everyone's story starts the same. Like they stumbled upon ABA.
Yes.
And then they maybe got into that more traditional role. So yeah, I stumbled upon ABA I learned about it in high school because I was nannying for a family, and one of their kids was getting ABA therapy. And of course, back then it was like private pay and that kind of thing. But the mom let me sit in on the session. She was like, if you're interested in this. And I was like, sure. And of course, thought it was so cool. But then I was getting my undergraduate in psychology, as many of us who know what we're doing with our life do.
I don't know what to do. Just go get an undergrad degree in psychology.
That'll work. That'll get me somewhere. And I heard whispers about ABA there, but still didn't really know what it was, didn't know what I wanted to do. Learned it was a whole graduate degree. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just keep going to school. And so I ended up getting a dual master's in social work and ABA, which I really am glad that I did. And I wish that there were more programs like that. There aren't a ton, from at least my knowledge. And I wish more universities partnered with other departments, because then, as we know, we get into the field and coordination of care is like top of mind.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So having that like multidisciplinary background has been really helpful. I've never personally practiced as a social worker. I had the background, I had the training, but then I went into, like I said, the traditional, became an RVT while I was waiting to take my BCBA exam, became a BCBA, then became a clinical director, the traditional path. But still having that knowledge in my back pocket was really helpful, just because when I would coordinate with other social workers, I knew what they were talking about.
Mhm.
Or if I
Yeah.
was even coordinating with teachers and things like that, I at least could appreciate where they were coming from, knowing that there's other things, that can be blended with ABA.
What were the courses that you took that were different in that path? So if you're doing a dual credential, you've got your
Yeah.
verified course sequence, and then you've got your additional
Mhm.
courses. What were those?
So the way I did it, just I think because of when I started the program, I did a year of social work first, and then I
Okay.
did a year of ABA. So for a 2-year
Oh,
master's program. And so I got front loaded with the social work thing.
yeah. So you're already
Um,
having that perspective to think
yeah.
this through.
And I think it was a little while ago. So I'm now trying to recall what the course, but a lot of it was like family centered relationships, things that maybe we would call mentalistic in the field now. But seeing that side, we were all saying the same things. We just call
Yeah.
it different things. And so I
Exactly.
think
Yeah.
that's been really helpful, learning that we're all working towards the same goal of bettering people's experiences and then helping them reach their goals. We just might be using different terminology, and that's fine. We'll just translate as professionals.
I love it.
But yeah, so I think that was really helpful, even though the classes were very different. I was learning about couples therapy and how to talk about different things like that. And not necessarily doing that, except for the fact that we're in families' homes, like you were saying, Liz, and
Exactly.
we see conflict or we see discrepancies in parents wanting to do things different ways. And so even though I was certainly not doing family therapy in the home, it's perspective to see it as a whole systems approach.
I like that. I'm going to remember that for future talk on the having the background of being in the home and the parent component, because that's a conversation that I had recently in a clinical meeting with BCBAs is when you see a parent struggling, what is our scope that we can support them on? And when is it beyond our scope to maybe consider a referral out for mental health support?
Yeah,
That's a whole nother conversation.
it is.
And
You need to
you're
know what's out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're making me think also just a lot about different families that I've worked with from different socioeconomic backgrounds who, families that are dealing with not having an air conditioner or just financially really struggling and needing resources. And I'm really curious and just thinking about how your social work background might have influenced your ability to empathize or just better serve those families in
Mhm.
navigating some of that. And as BCBAs, we have to make sure obviously that our BTs have what they need to be effective and comfortable in the home, but also guiding them in being respectful and sensitive and maximizing what is available to be able to teach. And so I can only imagine that having that social work training probably better prepared you to support those BTs and educate them a little bit. Cause I know I've had to have the situations where it's, yes, this home may be different than yours, but we need to understand that everyone lives differently. Everyone has different resources, and be sensitive in the way that we're communicating as well with families and with each other.
Yeah. And I think that's something to keep in mind all the time in our practice, that like we have to ebb and flow in what we're recommending because their resources might be different. If basic needs aren't being met in certain homes, maybe coming in with a 4-page BIP. I feel like we say this every time. We need to individualize and meet families where they are. And whether you're coming from a social work background or a teaching background or an OT, like whatever, I think it's helpful to have those other perspectives to remind us like, oh, there's other factors at play, instead of, like you said, Liz, instead of getting that tunnel vision of who's in
That's what I'm
Java
here
and I
for.
need to do this. Yeah, I need to do this intervention because it would be our English. Yeah, I think I do wish that there were more dual credentialed master's programs. Call to action. If anyone wants to start one,
Yes.
I would happily input. Because I do think it's really helpful to start that, lay the foundation for that coordination of care early. But then, yeah, so in terms of just my background, I did the traditional trajectory, as we were saying, but then I was curious about other angles of the field, moved into the payer space, the funder payer space for a little bit, learned about that, which I think is also really helpful. How we get money to do these things that we do is really good knowledge to have. And then from there, I was inspired to take that knowledge and teach the people about it. And so that's how I ended up here in kind of the training space and found a passion for that. I think a lot of people in our field are curious about
Oh, yeah.
the non-traditional ABA paths. And I just would say, follow the path, follow what you're interested in, because there is a need there. We just have to pave our own way because it's not necessarily always laid out for us in those non-traditional spaces.
Yeah.
I love it. I think we're going to get to that as we talk about certificate data, as we talk about the literature that's out there about women in our space, the WEBA inductees. I have gone over how I got into the field, so I'm not going to spend too much time and belabor it because I have so many things I want to talk about as a team. But if you listen to the behavioral view, I also went to UC Irvine. Liz and I are both anteaters. Zot Zot, which is the weirdest mascot. Can we talk about an anteater as a mascot and the fact that we said Zot? Is that what they even say? Has anyone heard
That's
an
what they
anteater?
say. And then you do the little hand sign. But I feel maybe I'm kind of embarrassed that I don't know all the. I think there used to be anteaters on campus before, which is, I guess that's a whole issue. Yeah.
But yeah, Liz and I come from very similar regional experiences. I stumbled into the field like many of our colleagues. I loved children. I knew I loved children when I was 10. I babysat at an early age. I was a nanny in Orange County. One of the families knew another family receiving ABA. And I'll date myself here and saying there were Craigslist ads. So I'm talking like the paper Craigslist, not even online.
Nice.
And I remember opening up Craigslist and seeing an ad for a tutor working with children with autism. And again, being a poor undergraduate, the pay was amazing. It was $25 an hour. I lived in Orange County.
Oh my gosh.
Again, in 1999, 2000, that's a lot of money. I said, I can figure out what it takes for that much money as a 19-year-old girl. So went in, the family had 2 boys on the spectrum, and I just fell in love. It all made sense. Everything that they were doing, just my rapport with these 2 little boys, they have continued to be 25 years later, the passion behind what I do. I think about them often. I think about where they are today. The family is very removed from social media, so I have no contact. But whenever I go home, I know they've moved, but they drive by just wondering what's going on with them. And it just laid the foundation for everything that followed. Went to Chicago, got into graduate school for the first cohort for their ABA program in person at the Chicago school, but I deferred to stay with the boys for another year. So I went out there the second year that they had the brick and mortar. And I worked with a little girl there who I fell in love with, another home program. Again, because this is before insurance reform. So parents are funding what we're doing. And the difference back then was in both families, the moms were heavily trained in the application of behavior analysis. So they were the supervisor, and it could be a behavior analyst or it could have been a special education teacher. In Chicago, I had Steve Ward and Terry Grimes, who were BCBAs, and they were able to oversee my hours. But mom, in that case, had video cameras in every room. And if I was presenting an SD incorrectly, I would hear, no, that's not it. That's not a receptive instruction. Stop what you're doing. And I remember being a young grad student, just, okay. Yeah. And I would be running a tech program instead of receptive because I was mixing up my terminologies. Really had a full dose early on of parent engagement, collaboration, distance supervision, because my supervisors lived in another state. And then what I think is the funniest part of my story is I was in graduate school in downtown Chicago, but my family was in the suburbs, a 2-hour train ride away. So I had to, when they talk about, I walked uphill in the snow barefoot. I took the train 2 hours. My train ticket monthly was the price of how much I was paid for the actual job. So I just ended up netting a zero for working, but I needed the hours. And it was a 2-hour drive. So I'd sleep on the way there at 6 a.m. and then do homework on the way into the city for courses. But best experience of my life. Went and worked in a clinic after that with Dr. Partington. Really cool experience. He had just rewritten the ABLES-R, and our job, very much like what we do in the Institute, I had to edit lines of the ABLES-R for typos or tact versus manned. And back then, again, we didn't have it as well. It was like the printout book with our writing, and I would have the H section and then pass that to my colleague, and she would give me the I section, and we would go through line by line.
Wow.
It was a very interesting time to come out, and then you sit for your exam. So I sat for my exam. When insurance reform had passed, that's when I decided I needed to understand like the tiered model, because in that clinic, I was the behavior analyst and the technician. So I worked with the learner and I modified all of the programs in the moment. And then I would go and train the parents, and parents were funding most of our treatment.
Yeah.
But yeah, went down the run of the mill, same path after that as it sounds like all of us have gone through, and really found myself loving training, just loving training technicians, behavior analysts, understanding, did they understand am I accomplishing what I need to accomplish in teaching you? And then found myself here. Central Reach was a different path in that when Jim sold the Avels and AFLs to Central Reach, he was going to retire. So he needed someone to really share his history and his baby and make sure I knew. So I came over really managing the assessments 4 years ago and then have just shifted into different roles.
Yeah.
And now we work in software full time.
Yeah.
But I love that it's still all rooted in that passion. Like we were all so passionate about working with kids and being around them. We were all so passionate about these kind of initial families that we got to work with, and obviously passionate about the ABA space and the behavior analytic work. Like you said, when things just make sense. Oh my gosh, to understand why people do things.
Yes.
It's the coolest. It will never not blow my mind. I don't even care like how many times I talk about functions of behavior. It will never blow my mind. So I just think no matter where you go, if you're rooted still in that passion, you could end up in software and you're still linking it back to those things that you love. It all just works together.
Yeah.
And it's such a worldview, right? It's like I can't go out in the world and have dinner or go out with my friends without evaluating everything from functions of behavior and ABCs and all of the contingencies that we know. And then probably super annoying to hang out with because that's just how that's my life. That's how we see everything. And that's that radical behaviors perspective that I hopefully think we bring into our work, whether it's with individuals with autism and IDD or in software or wherever it is that we hope to send and apply our science.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I can't look at anything without being through a behavior analytic lens. It drives my husband nuts. I'm like, from a behavior perspective, he's like, yeah, I get it. You're a BCBA. I understand.
Just talk to me in layman's terms.
You can't turn it off. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I think that's really cool that it's so ingrained in us and we're so passionate about it. Yeah. Like I said, I think I encourage anyone to try to learn how to apply what you love about ABA to other spaces if you're interested in that, because it is applicable even if it's not a traditional path.
Yeah. So Nessa, I want to pivot a little bit. I've been dying to ask this question, mainly because obviously I've supervised many trainees or just mentored many students that are interested in excelling professionally. And a question that they often give, and I want to ask you, is what things should be considered when determining whether or not to pursue a PhD?
Oh my goodness, my answer is gonna be really
you
funny.
You have that unique perspective. I know that's a big one, and maybe just start with yourself.
Sharing, because we're trying to really get to know our listener. There are two main MOs if we're going to use a little bit of our science here. Number one, I'm super competitive. I am. You know me outside of the workforce. In my personal life, sports, athletics, competition drives me. When I was thinking of pursuing a PhD, my youngest son was 3. And my husband, Greg, was like, look, our kids you can't go back and get a PhD. There is no way that we can manage the kids, their schedules, our work lives while you're pursuing a PhD. So I gave myself, when he's 5 and goes to kindergarten and he's in school longer days, let's start to evaluate it. So I started doing the research, checking out programs, starting to have those conversations with programs, starting to put my feelers out there. And then I had a couple friends go back to school to get their PhD. And that is where that competitive freedom in it. I love our science as much as they do. And they have young children. Why can't I do it? So that was really the driving force of what got me into the programs, what kept me motivated to go through the programs. And I think I say this to my doc students, and I hear this often, which is picking a topic you just love. Because in year 1, you're relearning the science. You're relearning the literature reviews, the philosophy, the underpinnings. I was in the field applied for almost more than a decade. And then I was like, let me go back to school. I kept up with continuing ed. I went to conferences, but going back to school and seeing it from that side after being in the field for 10 years, it was mind blowing. I walked away with 1, I know nothing. I still feel like I know now more than I know nothing than I ever did before. And 2, a really deep appreciation for the research and all of the individuals in our field who have conducted research and written the papers to get out the evidence base that we can replicate. That was really fantastic. But again, going back to what gets people to finish, picking a topic you love. Because if you don't love what you're researching in your dissertation process, it is 4 years of spinning your wheels trying to make something work to just finish a dissertation. So
Mhm.
compassionate care was what I loved. It's that theme I think we're all talking about. I was born in the field via parents' involvement, and that made me a compassionate practitioner early on. And I wanted to articulate it as a science and a behavioral indicator for our fields.
Yeah.
Yeah, what made me go back, my competitive spirit, what made me stick through it was my love for compassion.
Mhm.
Well, there you
I
go.
love
Those
that.
are opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right.
That is, I think Liz and I have both talked about it. Do we go back? Do we get our
Yeah.
PhD? Do we not? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that's a hard question to say, but is there, what do I want to say? Would you recommend? I guess
Yeah.
is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think, and I see what's funny is if you read, there's all those ABA Facebook channels, right? All of the different ones, and people ask, should I go back? What should I go back to study? And I think it's up to really the purpose of this conversation, career pathing. The doors will open, but for the most part, you have to open those doors yourself. I was lucky in that I had my experience with Dr. Partington. I think that opened a lot of doors for me early on, having that connection to the Ables are. And I think that I always remember that and I want to pay it forward that I had a mentor that helped guide me. But once the doors are open, you as the individual have to, back to the first topic, sell yourself. I think Bailey and Birch talk about it in their 2016 25 skills for professional behavior analysts. You have to be able, as a steward of the science, to sell yourself as that individual who is an expert, who knows the science and the technology, but who also can become a great, I guess the best word is steward of the science. You are your own expertise, and people will hire you if you are an expert, but also can build rapport and talk the talk and walk the walk. So going back to school is, right, it's individual circumstance, financial, time, bandwidth. And then I know a lot of PhDs where it's like you have the PhD, but you still have to do the work to get yourself in the right places to utilize that degree. Because there are a lot of behavior analysts and we have very similar training. The differentiator is that research component. What do you want to do in the field that's going to require a PhD? And then is there going to be a return on investment for investing in that degree if you don't make it to those kind of roles that might bring in more?
Great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I love that you talked about mentorship because I think if as a field we are going to try to branch out and break into other populations or other sections, we need mentors to help kind of guide the way. And even if you're not going to follow their exact path, I think that's really key because none of us would be here without our mentors. That's for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're really making me think about, and I don't have this memorized, but you're really making me think about just some of the adversity that the women that were recognized in the Women's Hall of Fame had to deal with.
Yeah.
Can we just talk about how one of them couldn't even go to Harvard and had to go to a different school because women weren't allowed at that time? Yeah. And that was just one of the stories. It's a really good research article just highlighting each of the different crazy and just really frustrating to hear situations and issues that and barriers that were placed in front of them and they had to push through. Yeah, it definitely makes a difference to have someone that's supporting you, but yeah, oftentimes you still find you have to push yourself through as well.
And exposing yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing I learned from conference season this year is it's uncomfortable to walk into a room where you know nobody. It's uncomfortable to go to a conference completely alone. Even having been in the field this long, there are times when I go alone and I'm like, okay, am I going to sit in my room or am I going to go socialize? But if you socialize, you're going to meet people that you wouldn't have met watching Netflix in your hotel room. and you expose yourself to different connections. And I think that is the greatest thing about our field is that our mentors, our connections really do help us open doors to new opportunities. And that leads to one of the things we talked about before we hopped on this call was the professional emphasis within our field. Like we know large percentage of listeners, those of you especially that are coming for Central Reach, you work with autism and IDD. But I also know looking at that data that's on there on the BACB certificate data, and then just anecdotally, people are looking to expand and the world needs us to expand. We need to be able to work at businesses applying OBM. We need to work in schools more in a collaborative approach. We need to work in so many capacities. And the best way to do that is to connect and find a mentor, to go to spaces that maybe BCBAs aren't and start having conversations. I think it's important for our science.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're talking or at least I feel like I keep talking to maybe a newer behavior analyst who's interested, seeking mentorship, but also for those of you who've been in the field for a while and maybe you have specific interests, seeking out how to be a mentor, I think is really interesting. Or
Mhm.
we talked about like my graduate experience. One of my professors and mentors, Dr. Alyssa Wilson, she was very passionate about gambling research and using ABA to treat gambling behaviors and study and all of that. And so hearing about that so early on in my career was so helpful to say like,
Yeah.
okay, yes, like the traditional path is working with autistic individuals and maybe going into a school or a clinic or a home. But then there were all these other avenues. And I had a colleague in my cohort in grad school who was so passionate about working in gerontology and with patients with dementia and Alzheimer's. And so she would frequently come to class and say, okay, I know
Mhm.
we're reading an article about autism and IDD care, but I have an article about Alzheimer's. And we would all be like, oh, give me, like, let me look
Yeah,
at it.
let's read this.
And so having that so early, again, I still went the traditional path for quite a while, but it got my wheels turning that if there was ever an interest, I could shift if I wanted to. So I think speaking to people who have been in the field for a while as mentors, make sure
Yeah.
you're talking to your trainees, to your RBTs who are maybe interested in becoming BCBAs about all the different avenues, because I think that is what's going to help disseminate and spread information sooner.
I just want to throw out here what I think is a pretty good tip. I think we have these social media platforms, great resources like LinkedIn. I think I really would
Mhm.
encourage people to leverage that because you can really get insights into how different people have gotten where they are. You have this timeline. And so if you're interested in a specific profession or industry, it's actually a really cool tool where you can actually see how, where people started, right? Oftentimes they start as BTs and they might have that on their LinkedIn, and then you see how they went from that position all the way to VP or whatever role they might currently be in. So I think that can be a really cool tool. I know I definitely had people that influenced me. Siri Ming is actually one of them. So I had like certain people that I was like, I want to be like her or him one day. And I would just look at what they were doing, where they started and what different
Yeah.
checkpoints. You never even know. Maybe even where they worked at one point is hiring. But just that's actually what inspired me to say one day I want to oversee fieldwork programs. Was actually looking and seeing what she was doing. And so that all worked out through my experience at the organization I told you guys about. But I find that tool to be very motivating for me. So finding people that you're working towards, whether it's
Aligned.
competitive
Yeah.
or if it's just simply like you are someone that I can see myself following in your footsteps and making my own path as well. I think that it helps make it feel real and possible, which I think is
Mhm.
ties back to that conversation of the impact of not seeing people like yourself doing what you're hoping to do or achieve. So I very much sought that out and tried to find people that I could learn from through their career trajectory.
It's a great idea to use your resources. Everything's so online right now. And so I think that's a great idea. Nessa, you talked about the BACB certificate data. If you're even curious, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, you've talked about all these different avenues, like what are they? If
Yeah.
you go to the BACB's website under their certificate data, the very last little pie chart they have shows the percentages of the ABA professionals that are working in all of these different spaces. No shock that the highest is working in the autism spectrum disorder space at almost 83% of us. But then there's looks like almost 20 other avenues: sports and fitness, public policy, intellectual and developmental disabilities, higher education, all of these different things. So you could combine that data with what you're saying, Liz.
Oh
Go
my
to
gosh.
the website, look at
That's
the different areas, and then go to LinkedIn
Yeah.
and try to find people who work in those spaces and connect
reach
with
out to them.
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely.
the best piece. Reach out to them.
Yeah.
Everyone is so approachable in this
Yes.
field.
Yeah.
I love that about it. And actually thinking of that data, here's a question or something that's popped up as we've been talking. Here's the barrier. And I don't know if we're going to have the answer, but if you're listening, you have the answer, message us. Funding.
Yep.
What is the funding stream? I've got a doc student right now through the Chicago school who's conducting her dissertation on sports and fitness. And I was pulled in as her chair because of my background in CrossFit coaching, and really trying to apply BST to sports and fitness training is where we're looking at her treatment package. This is a great research component. It's going to add to the literature. There is a pretty strong literature base. I know Dr. Milton Berger out of Florida does a lot of work there. Dr. Mallory Quinn, I think she's somewhere in the Southeast as well has an entire business based on this. But again, going back to the conversation of a PhD or not a PhD, the diversification of funds, the requirement to push ourselves into these new spaces to show our worth. We love our science. You're listening, you are a lover of our science. You are probably a behavior analyst or a technician or working towards becoming one. But how do we show the value of our science world? I think that's, if we can do, that's that call to action. If we're calling to action, and I know it's been called before. I know many people who have different platforms to speak on are saying, let's do this as a field. Let's expand beyond autism. How do we do that? How do we support you? How do we support the field in moving that way? It's hard.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it might start with you have your BCBA certificate, but you're acting as a different role in that different space. You're weaving your way in and then trying to go from there. But yeah, funding is a huge, like you said, a huge barrier. Conversations like this, I suppose, are the start, but mentorship and connections.
So the goal of this conversation was, if you're listening, right, the career pathing, and not just from our careers, we wanted to use our stories to paint the picture of how we all ended up at Central Reach. Similar pathways, similar passion, different kind of ways of ending up here in terms of run of the mill, having a contact, having a colleague. The thing that I think I hear often is, how do I get into it? So let's say I'm the run of the mill BCBA and we know, and at Central Reach, we get a ton of applicants, right? We hear that on our Reach and Teach and our all calls, a lot of people want to move from the clinical space into a different sector. And it seems like the leap from clinical into software that is you've utilized, that is the easiest way. I've already used Central Reach. This is a great platform, or any of the other softwares that are out there.
Yeah.
But then I sometimes in LinkedIn will get the question of, how did you go from clinical to software? I'm burnt out. I no longer want to work in the field. I want to get your guys' insights there, because I'm of the opinion that, one, if you're new, you've got to spend your time boots on the ground doing the work. You can't train. Your scope is going to be minimized if you don't do the work on the floor as a clinician.
Yeah.
I wanted to get your opinions on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Of course. I think you have to know, like what you said, you have to be able to sell yourself, and you have to know what you're bringing to the table. And that starts with finding what you're passionate about and doing that within your current role already. So when I was a BCBA, when I was a clinical director, I was getting involved in the training and finding a passion for that and learning how to make quality training materials that were helpful in what I was disseminating. And you have to do that within your current role and current scope already to be able to prove that you have those skills and you can apply them maybe when you make the leap to wherever you're wanting to go.
I like that recommendation.
I think that's really it, Olivia, is really finding opportunities to apply your interest and actually gain that experience. I think that's ultimately how you're going to really uniquely position yourself to be in the role that you're seeking to get, just building your skills in that way. And it might, in some ways, maybe for whatever reason, maybe there isn't a perfect opportunity in your current role, then it might mean that you need to find some extra time to find an extra activity. And maybe it's volunteer work that you're engaging in to make that happen and to gain that experience. There's a lot of organizations in our field that will provide you with the opportunity to get that experience if you're able to make the time.
Raise your hand, volunteer for things. Like get involved. I do feel the need to say the disclaimer here that we all, I think, I hope you can hear that through our passion, the traditional path that we took. We love the families and kids and individuals that we were able to work with. I hope the takeaway here is not like, everyone leave the autism space.
No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, we need those high quality. We need you guys, all of us in that field. It's just there's so many more BCBAs now. So it's, let's spread the wealth. Let's go into other avenues and help even more in other avenues. But I want the disclaimer and the takeaway to be that like, where we are today, it's still a very valuable place to be. And spreading the wealth as the field grows, hopefully just multiplies that and doesn't take away from anything.
Yeah.
I also have to put a pin in that. I went back into so I came to Central Reach for 2 years and then went back into the clinical work because it just drives my soul. So I work about 10 hours if I can with learners via telehealth. And if I had more time, I would go into an actual clinic, but it just fuels my passion for why I'm here. And it brings me back to what we're doing. I can understand the experience of the BCBA still because I have treatment plans I have to write. I have learner, my intervention is not working. And goodness, does it create frustration and make me go back to trying to understand the philosophy of the science when I really thought that was going to work and he's not responding. So it's one of those, again, the field is large. Our goal is to really share how we came to a software company to work, but to also acknowledge that many of our listeners are in the traditional path of ABA. And we're here to really support you, gather your feedback, share more of who we are, truly say that we value the work that you're doing because it is, I think it's where we all started and our why behind what we're doing here behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. At the very least, this is just a conversation about coordinating and collaborating with other disciplines if you're staying within the space you're in.
And then I think the big takeaway is mentorship. If you have the opportunity, if you are a leader within your organization or somewhere within your space, the doors, and I don't want to say for other women, but again, we are also a predominantly female field in terms of certificates. We have to all support each other, and not just in a representation way, but in a way that we were guided here by our mentors. So when you have someone that requires mentorship or more support, and even further, more individualized support, because not all of our staff are the same, spend more time with that individual, invest in them, because our field, that investment turns around, right? They're here for a long term. They're going to turn around and mentor others. I think that's my favorite part about this field. It's that mentorship component.
Yeah, I love that.
All right, what are our takeaways? We covered so many things.
We did. I think a big takeaway is take a look at that BACB data. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And then take a look at some of the women in behavior analysis inductees and their stories. I think, Liz, you touched on that. And it's just really inspiring as like you said, a predominantly female field.
Yeah.
Then there is a paper that came out by Volkert, 2026. So this is a new one. It's personal career narrative. So what I love that WeBot spotlights is not just the Hall of Fame, but a lot of the women that have led before us that leave their imprint on us. I think that's very much what you're saying, Liz, that when we look to women that are our role models, that we aspire to behave. There are papers out there that allow us to see all of the different ways that women before us created that path. And someone for me that has really impacted me, I never had the opportunity to meet with her, is the late Elizabeth Hughes Fong. A couple of years ago, she did pass, unfortunately, and she had done a ton of work in the culturally responsive care space, really pushing through the DEIA components of it. And she's got a number of friends and colleagues in our field who have published since her passing, who have worked on her behalf to continue to push forward. But I think that we can all look to someone who's inspired us. And for me, it's Dr. Hughes Fong in just her work, her writing, some of the recordings that I've seen throughout her time in our field is we all are impacting someone in some capacity, even if we've never met them. I never got the opportunity to meet her, but goodness, has she really carved a place in my heart for our field in ways that I want to continue to contribute on her behalf.
I love this love letter or appreciation post to our mentors too. I just think it shows how impactful it is. So if you want to be a mentor, someday someone could talk to you like this. So
and then I always have to bring the text in. I've got it's LeBlanc, Sellers, and Eli. And I've dropped this in the bathtub so many times. I have tabs. It's amazing. Supervisor and mentor. It is so good. And they not only can you get the text online. I remember talking to Dr. Sellers. They've made this accessible. They have all of the chapter interactive activities available for free on sloanpublishing.com. Oh, wow. In addition to Pepperdine University has taken all the chapters and made lectures out of them. And those are free on that website. So if you don't have the resources to figure out how to mentor and support this text, which we'll put in the show notes, and the website, all of the assets are free to support you in becoming a mentor. So that's something that I love that we've got those individuals in our field who are giving back, right? We talk about resources and accessibility, and they're doing that. So I think that's an important one, is to lead by example.
Yeah, and a free resource. I mean, that is hard to come by these days.
Yeah,
so
that's huge. Have that link.
Yeah.
Yes, we will add that. All right. We talked about ourselves for almost a full hour.
Time flies when you're having fun.
This was fun. I feel like we want to do this often for you as listeners. Again, we'll look for the feedback, even if it's punitive. We read all of the feedback, and we do hope to respond to it. But gosh, I feel like we went all of the different pathways, and I want to thank you both for sharing yourselves with me today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it was so fun getting to hear your stories, and I hope that people listening feel inspired in some direction, one way or another, from this.
Well, we will see you all next month. This is the month of April, so this should be available to you in the next few weeks. And then we will have our next one in May. So we hope to have you tune in then. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us on The Behavioral View. We appreciate your time and the heart you bring to this work. If you're here for a CEU, just take the quick quiz to wrap up. Let's keep talking. I'll see you next time.